Well, welcome to another Scotty's Tech Talk, as technical as it is. Today I thought I just might go through, what you see a lot of YouTube sailing channels, and they'll flash on to the chart plotter and there'll be a whole bunch of numbers like, we're flying an aeroplane. I thought it might be a good opportunity for those non-sailors, people who are not used to what all those numbers mean, just to explain some of them, the ones that we use. Now, these are by no means the only numbers that you can use, but we are sailing now, so I'll flip over and just show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is our B&G Chartplotter, and we like to have it in this configuration, which is on the main part of the screen is our chart, so we can see. I can zoom in on that, see whether we're going to hit anything or not. You can see that little yellow thing there is our trail. That's our track. That's where we've been, and it actually changes color depending upon how fast we're going. So we're not going too fast at the moment. It's going to be changing to a slightly different color now, but we'll speed up as the wind picks up. And as you see, I can zoom right into a great level of detail on the chart. But that's not what I wanted to really talk about. I wanted to talk about what all of these things mean and why we use them. So the first one at the top left is called speed over ground, SOG, speed over ground. Now this is just your GPS telling you how fast you're going from A to B. Really, really important, because there's lots of things that impact boats, like current, tide, waves, other things that will mean that your speed over ground is highly influenced upon those things. So you'll see next to it we've got a thing called boat speed. Now that's the little paddle wheel that exists on our boat that actually spins around and tells us how fast the boat is going through the water. So in this case we see the boat's doing 5 knots, but the GPS tells us we're only doing 4.8 knots, which means that we're being unduly influenced by the current or by the tide, just to a very minor degree. Now you can see in the bottom right hand corner I've got what that tide rate looks like. It's a mathematical calculation, so it just does the difference between the two on average for over a period of time. It's a little bit more complicated than just subtracting boat speed from speed over ground, but you can see, or vice versa, but you can see at the moment it's only impacting us by about 0.4 of a knot against. I've got this other little tool which I'll talk about later, but this is our other little instrument here, and you can see a little arrow, and that's the direction of the current as well. So we can tell that it's against us at the moment, but it's only less than half a knot, so it's not a big problem. Going down, so we've got TWS and AWS. Now TWS means true wind speed, and AWS means apparent wind speed. Now these are super important, especially on a catamaran. So true wind speed is actually what the wind is doing. If you went out into the middle of a field with a little instrument that measured how fast the wind was blowing, that's what it would be. So we've got a little instrument at the top of our mast. It does all sorts of calculations to account for different things, but it's telling me that we've got currently 11 knots, 10 knots now of true wind speed. Now that's all well and good, but the apparent wind speed is what actually drives our boat, the AWS. Now this is usually different, very, very unlikely. If you're if the wind's coming directly from our side, it can be exactly the same, but it's usually quite different from the true wind speed. So apparent wind speed in this case is slightly lower because the wind is behind us, and that just means that we are moving forwards. The wind is, and that's taking some of the impact of the wind off the sails. So if we were going into the wind, because the wind is from behind us, and I'll explain that in a second, but the wind is sort of behind us, it's definitely coming from our rear quarter, which means that because we're moving forwards, the wind that's impacted in the sails is slightly less. So that apparent wind speed is everything to a sailor, especially a catamaran sailor. We reef based on the apparent wind speed. It can be higher than the true wind speed, or it can be lower depending upon what direction to the wind you are traveling. Now, and when people say, oh, I'm doing 4.7 knots in 10 knots of wind, what they really should be saying is that I'm doing 4.7 boat speed in 11.4 apparent. So the apparent wind speed is the thing that's really important because it's what drives the boat. Now, the next line down is AWA and TWA. So AWA is the apparent wind angle and the TWA is the true wind angle. So I'll explain the true because it kind of follows from the true wind speed. It's funny that I've got them around that way, but it just sort of works better for me. The true wind speed is exactly if I'm standing in the middle of a football field, imagine with an instrument, it's telling me what direction the wind is blowing off the direction that I'm facing. So that's important. It's not the actual way that the wind, I'm not moving around to face the wind. I'm saying if I'm facing in this direction, that wind is hitting me, in this case, from 118 degrees, 120 degrees, which if you think about the compass and, it starts at 0 degrees and then goes to 90 and then 180 if the wind was directly behind you. So anything between 90 and 180 is telling you that the true direction of the wind is coming from behind the boat. In this case, it's our starboard quarter. The apparent wind speed, again, it gets impacted. It's what the angle on the boat is actually doing. Because we're moving forwards, we actually impact the angle and the wind drifts towards the front of our boat, which means that we're getting 100, in this case 100, even though the wind's at 128 angle, or 130, the apparent wind angle is 100. So that's because we're moving forwards and we're impacting the angle that the wind is hitting the boat. It's still coming, because it's less than 90 degrees, it still means that the wind is coming on from our rear right-hand quarter. We call that the starboard quarter. But it's not as deep, it's not as far behind us as the true wind, because we're moving through the water and we're moving with speed forwards. A little complicated, but you get the general gist. So again, we're always looking for the true wind, the apparent wind angle and the apparent wind speed. They're the two things that are really important to us. Will tell us how we should set our sails and how fast we should be expecting to go. The next two things down, one's important, one's not. So the sea temperature tells us it's currently 25.7, 25.8 degrees. Now, if you're fishing, that's really important. When we're at an anchorage and we want to know how cold the water's going to be, that's really important. But otherwise, not really much use for us sailing. But it's interesting to note that, if it's at 25 is quite cool compared to, put that on. 25 is quite cool compared to what we have seen the temperatures at 27, 28. And we could expect, as we head further north in the Adriatic Sea, we could expect to see temperatures approaching 30 degrees. So that's a very warm water bath, if you like. The depth is really important. So at the moment we know we're around about 98.8 metres. I think it's only accurate to about 100 metres. And the chart indicates that that's about right, about 100 metres of where we are. You can see there's a little squiggle that says 95. So yeah, that sounds about right. We only really care about this when we're coming into an anchorage. We can see how deep the water is, or if we're going close to a piece of land, we can see exactly how deep that water is. And that's actually being recorded from underneath our right hull. So we have two hulls on a catamaran. It's being recorded from the right-hand side one. We call that the starboard hull. And it's also offset by 60 centimetres because that's the distance between the waterline level where the boat sits and where that's actually taking the reading from. So we know it's whatever that depth says, it should be the depth underneath our hull to the bottom of the seafloor. Again, it's 98.8 metres, who cares? If it's 8 metres or 6 metres or it's 3 metres, then we really do care. We need to be paying attention. TWD is true wind direction. Now that's really important from a forecasting perspective, or just a general, I wonder where the wind's coming from, if it's swinging around a lot. This is what, when the news tells you, or the weather channels tell you the wind is going from this direction. We know that, again, if you think of your compass, 0 is north, 90 degrees is east. So we know the weather forecast is for the wind to be at the northeast, around about this strength, which is good. And that's exactly what it's doing. So the true wind angle, it's blowing from the northeast at 60 knots. Our angle, because we're not going directly into the wind, the way that the wind's hitting us is 129 degrees, but because we're moving, the impact of that is 111 degrees. Now the other things we've got on there, I've explained about the tide rate. So all the WPT DEST, VMG, DDT and WPT BRG is all to do with our navigation, where we're going to a point. So in this case, I've set a waypoint off Dubrovnik, and I know that it's 24.7 miles from this point. So it'll just keep counting down as we get closer. It's based on a GPS, so it's not doing a calculation based on the boat speed and how many miles it thinks we've clocked up. It's doing it by GPS, and it'll tell us, oh, we've got 24.7 miles to go. Now the VMG on the CSE, that's velocity made good over the course. Now, all this means, because I've only set one point on this course, it just means that we're traveling towards the point that I've set at a speed of around about 6.13 knots. So that's quite fast, and that's good. Now that comes into play if you're thinking about tacking, you're thinking about how long should I tack, what angles that you want to sail on, if you're trying to get to a point as quickly as possible. So we look at that, but generally speaking, we like our VMG to be above 5 because we're cruisers. At this point in time, it's doing around about that 6.4 knots, which is great. Now notice that our speed over ground is 6.5, and that's because we're not exactly lined up to the angle that we need to be, because I'm just getting a little bit of sea room on the Croatian coast. The other thing is, so that's the VMG on course, velocity made good. DTD is our distance to destination. Again, if we'd set more than one waypoint, you'd see it's 24 miles to the next waypoint, but our destination might be 50 miles away. So that's handy if we're on a longer passage. So we know once we get to the point that I've set, just manually really quickly, we know that we've got another 5 or so miles to go after that to get into the dock where we have to clear into the country. So it's just, to me, it's just an indication of, oh, this is where we'll turn into Croatia itself. The waypoint bearing is important when you've set a course. It just tells me where I should be aiming at if I want to take the straightest route to that course. So we're sort of getting there in the moment. This is my autopilot. This is my autopilot, and it's telling me that we're currently aiming at 290 degrees. Because it dances around a little bit, you can see that it's actually 289 degrees, but gets up to 290 and might go a little bit over. It just wanders around a little bit. It doesn't adjust really, really rapidly, otherwise that would be too uncomfortable. So I could probably bring that up 5 degrees rather, to 295. And that'll bring us closer to the waypoint bearing that we want to do. It'll also impact a couple of things. It'll make our apparent wind angle go down in relation to the true wind angle, and it should actually speed us up a little bit. But I don't want to do the full 10 degrees because I'm trying to clear this point up here. As I said, I've mentioned before, the last thing is the tide rate, and we don't really need to worry about that today, but it's impacting us by 0.3 of a knot. And if we can see on this little instrument here, we can see that's coming from our left to right. So it's actually going to push us closer to the land by that 0.2 knots. I'm not going to be too concerned about that. That's really not going to worry me. So I'm not really going to be correcting anything for that. I'll go quickly over what these instruments are. We're interested. So these are our little instruments that we use. This one here gives us we call it a windrose effect. It'll tell me the little arrow is the current. The little yellow point you can see just underneath the degrees of where we're heading is where we're aiming for, because we've set a waypoint. You can see the boat speed. Again, that's not as important as speed over ground, but it tells me if the sails are set properly. The true wind angle, maybe we could have apparent wind angle there, would be more useful to us. True wind direction and the true wind speed. So I know it's just little things that I can look at You can see also these arrows A and T, that's the apparent wind angle and the true wind angle. So you can see as we speed up, the apparent wind angle will keep heading up towards the front of the boat. So that's important to note based on this wind angle anyway. So these are useful instruments for us when we're very useful if you're racing. When you're cruising, in reality you don't really look at them very much. This instrument here is very, very important. That's our auto helm. We need to always make sure that this thing's working for us. There's a couple of different settings that we use, but this one here is just on A, which is automatic. We just manually set the angle that we want the boat on. In this case it's 295 degrees. We set that with this little unit here. We also have a little remote, but this is the one that we use mostly. We can change by 10 degrees to the left or the right, that's the port or the starboard, or 1 degree. And then this just turns it off and changes the mode. We can change this to wind mode, which is, it will do a correction to the apparent wind angle or the true wind angle, depending upon where the wind is currently sitting. So it's smart enough to know how to adjust itself, which is really handy, especially if you want to sail pretty much dead downwind. You can just have that set to around about 160 degrees, and then the boat will dance up to 170 degrees. 180 degrees is too close, the wind is too close behind you, and I'll explain that in another tech talk. So that's about how the wind direction, how we set our sails. We do have another one of these. We have an identical one over the other side. So if I was racing like in Sydney Harbour, or I was had to change sides all the time, I've got a little bit of an instrument there that can tell me how the boat speed's going, the apparent wind angle, etc. So that's it. I just wanted to go through, because you see these people look at that and go, oh look, I'm doing 6.3 knots in 12 knots of wind, and and you just need to understand that it is boat speed's important in that, when they're saying I'm doing this fast in this wind, but it's the apparent wind angle and the apparent wind speed, that's everything that's important as to why you're going a certain speed based on the current wind. Anyway, that's it for the Tech Talk today. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please share it to someone else who might not be a sailor. I apologise for all those racing sailors out there where I laboured certain points. Obviously you wouldn't have stayed to the end, but everyone else who was interested in what all those numbers mean, this was Scott's Tech Talk. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments. Love to go through them. I am by no means a racing expert, so in terms of some of the different gauges that we could use, love to have your input. If you wanted to give it in the comments, please do so. That's it for now. Like and subscribe, of course, if you can. Thank you so much. This has been Scott's Tech Talk.